Bernie Sanders recently released a platform. I mean, he's been releasing platforms for all kinds of policies that he wants to pass if he becomes president. And one thing that he decided to focus on recently was the issue of what they refer to as the political media complex. Many of you know that to be the corporate media, essentially, considering the fact that we have six companies, six organizations owning all the media companies, essentially. So all the media, kind of the people that give us all of our information, and or just kind of broadcast TV shows, give us our news, obviously, give us air different like TV shows and whatnot. So Bernie has a plan to essentially break up that whole kind of puzzle piece. It's a big puzzle piece put together by all the giant corporations. He wants to break that up and make it a lot more fair for like independent media such as myself and all the other people that are broadcasting on YouTube. He wants to put regulations on Google and Facebook, I believe, as well. So I'm going to be reading an article that's going to get into that. He also wants to up the status and kind of the existence of public media, so like PBS, NPR, because those kind of companies, they're not only are they being heavily defunded as of late, but they're also kind of getting more into like the corporate game. So they're getting funded by corporate donors, essentially. And so let's just kind of let's get into it. Bernie's going to explain it here. In fact he wrote an op-ed. He wrote an op-ed about this very issue. So it kind of gets into the details based on kind of how he explains it. So let me get the title of the article first. And this is an op-ed he wrote for, I believe it's called the Columbia Journal Review, I believe. I think it's a publication. Let me get the exact name here. I'm sorry. Yeah, Columbia Journalism Review. So he wrote the piece in there, and the title of the piece is it's an op-ed, Bernie Sanders on his plan for journalism. So I'm just going to get through various parts of the piece that mainly the important parts, and then we'll discuss it as we read along. So part of the article starts off by saying real journalism requires significant resources. One reason we do not have real journalism in America right now is because many outlets are being gutted by the same forces of greed that are pillaging our economy. For example, two silicon corporations, Facebook and Google, control 60% of the entire digital advertising market. They have used monopolistic control to siphon off advertising revenues from news organizations. A recent study by the News Media Alliance, a trade organization, found that in 2018, as newspaper revenues declined, Google made $4.7 billion off reporting that Google did not pay for. So basically what Google, and to some extent I guess Facebook too, I think Google is probably more, but they're profiting off of advertising these stories that are coming from these newspaper publications, and apparently they're profiting off of it too. It's crazy. So that's something that Bernie wants to crack down on. The next part here says, at the same time, corporate conglomerates and hedge fund vultures have bought and consolidated beleaguered local newspapers and slashed their newsrooms, all while giving executives big payouts. Gannett's proposed merger with Gatehouse Media, for instance, will consolidate hundreds of publications under one mega corporation's control and slash $300 million worth of synergies, which is often corporate speak for layoffs. Matt Pierce, a reporter for the Los Angeles Times, notes that the new Gannett/Gatehouse CEO is getting $4.5 million in bonuses, just bonuses alone, and stock, bonuses and stock just for walking in the door. So just bonuses and stock alone, he's making $4.5 million. It's crazy. And this is the new guy that's going into the company. Doesn't even necessarily own it. He's part of, he owns one of the companies, and he wants to obviously merge two companies together and make it one. He's profiting from bonuses and stock. From bonuses and stock alone, he's making $4.5 million. That's amazing. And the next part here says the result of these trends has been the decimation of journalism. Over the past 15 years, more than 1,400 communities across the country have lost newspapers, which are the outlets local television, radio, and digital news sites rely on for reporting. Since 2008, we have seen newsrooms lose 28,000 employees, and in the past year alone, 3,200 people in the media industry have been laid off. Today, for every working journalist, there are 6 people now working in public relations, often pushing a corporate line. So, for somebody like me, when I was in college, I majored in journalism and broadcasting. I also took some political science classes. So, largely my goal was to get into the business of, wanting to be a journalist in the media. And this was at a time that I was kind of not really all that familiar with how corporatized, and corrupted the media is, the mainstream media particularly is. And I wanted to join that a very special group of people, and I obviously have a very much different opinion these days. However, back then I did have that feeling, and it's tough. It's tough to get a job in that field. I mean, aside from what Bernie is laying out here in the op-ed, saying there are 6 people working in public, six people now working in public relations. I'm sorry, today for every working journalist, there are 6 people now working in public relations, often pushing a corporate line. So that's a big deal. And 3,200 people in the media industry have been laid off. Newsrooms have lost 28,000 employees since 2008. That's an 11-year period. They've lost 28,000 employees. That's crazy. So that's a big deal. And but pertaining to myself, I've had issues finding jobs in the media industry, and that's probably because a lot of them are not, a lot of these jobs, are not available. And honestly, from what I know, the best way to get a job in the media is you have to go out of your way. So you can't just let's say if I live in Los Angeles, I live in California. It's not like, I could just go to some local news station in Los Angeles and just automatically get a job. It doesn't work that easily. You have to be able to kind of you have to not necessarily take a lot of risks. Obviously, that is part of journalism, but you have to go out of your way and be like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm just going to go work in some, newsroom in the middle of nowhere, go to fucking North Dakota or something, or Wyoming, and work in the middle of the country, and just take any job you can just so you can get a little bit of, you get that, journalism experience, which is fine to, I guess, a certain extent. You should be able to obviously get out of your element and be able to work in different parts of the country. But at the same time, it's so you have to change your entire life just to get this, honestly, probably not very well paying job, because you just want to get some sort of job, but it is in your industry, so it's, who knows, it might end up being worth it. But having to move that far out of your way, so what if you have family, what if you have kids, you have to move your kids to the middle of nowhere just to get a job in your industry? It's not that simple. And that's just that's another example of how jobs in this country are just so hard to come by. They're few and far between. So anyway, let me continue on here. It says, at precisely the moment when we need more reporters covering the healthcare crisis, the climate emergency, and economic inequality, we have television pundits paid tens of millions of dollars to pontificate about frivolous political gossip as local news outlets are eviscerated. The negative effects are predictable. According to a working paper by researchers at Notre Dame and the University of Illinois, when newsrooms are hollowed out, overall costs to taxpayers rise because there are fewer reporters scrutinizing government transactions. That's a great point. He says, a study published by Spotlight on Poverty and Opportunity, a nonpartisan forum, found that despite millions of Americans struggling to survive, budget-strapped, quote, newsrooms have not turned their attention to poverty. So they're basically ignoring the issue of poverty, which is totally true. You don't hear about poverty and homelessness and stuff in the mainstream media at all. They're too busy, like, as he says, pontificating over, ridiculous political gossip. He continues on here and says, to be sure, when we see the Miami Herald expose on Jeffrey Epstein or the Charleston Gazette Mail's courageous reporting on the opioid crisis, we know that good reporters are still overcoming the odds and managing to produce essential journalism that scrutinizes power, exposes wrongdoing, and challenges the status quo. But we know that those success stories are too often the exception and not the norm. And by the way, when it comes to that, especially that last part, challenging status quo and scrutinizing power, what do you think we do here? What do you think, Kyle Klinsky of Secular Talk does? What do you think Jimmy Dore does? What do you think Tim Black does? All these people that are out there that are going after corporate media, or going after the establishment and criticizing the status quo. Why do you think we aren't the kind of people that people want to watch? No, I'm not talking about like regular people, you and me. Obviously, people are watching me. People are watching Kyle and Jimmy and Tim. They're all watching those people, but myself included. But the corporate type people, the people that are in that corporate bubble, especially in Washington D.C., they don't give a shit about what we have to say. They're, to us, we're a fly they can just swat out of the air. They don't want to have anything to do with us, and because they know we're going to criticize power, and you can't do that. You can't do that in Washington. If you criticize power, you end up getting, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to say taken out, but you're gonna get a slap on the wrist at the least. At the very, very least, you're going to get a slap on the wrist. At worst, you're just going to get fired and completely, thrown into a fucking closet, just like what happened to a couple of reporters who worked at, MSNBC, for example. Phil Donahue, that happened to him when he was criticizing the Iraq War. When, who was it? I think, what was her name? Ashley... there was this reporter that worked at MSNBC many years ago, and I think she was also criticizing the war or something, or just like kind of covering it very, kind of closely and all that stuff. I'll have to get her name in a second, but if I do, I'll post a little thing on the screen that corrects her name. But she was very, very critical of the media, and ironically, she actually ended up later working for CNN, and she was just covering, stupid shit. She was going back to covering the same thing the media, was typically covering, just like lame news, essentially, just lame, if you want to call it lamestream media news. So yeah. So let's continue on here. It says, today, after decades of consolidation and deregulation, consolidation and regulation, just a small handful of companies control almost everything you watch, read, and download. Given that reality, we should not want even more of the free press to be put under the control of a handful of corporations and benevolent billionaires who can use their media empires to punish their critics and shield themselves from scrutiny. After all, TV networks that rely on $4.5 billion a year of pharmaceutical ads may be thrilled to sugarcoat our current dysfunctional healthcare system, but they will never provide a consistently fair hearing for something like Medicare for All, even though polls show that a majority of Americans support such a proposal. And this is an argument that Bernie Sanders was also making during the debates, when he was saying, like, listen, this is, I think it was the second debate he made it, and he was talking about how, like, well, I think he was telling one of the CNN hosts, like, listen, what do you think? Who do you think is advertising on your channel? Once we go to break. And sure enough, there was, because I was watching it, as many people, other people watching it, they kind of recorded it for on their phones and stuff, and then displayed it on Twitter and stuff. But they were showing commercials for whatever various, I don't know what the name of it was, but it was some healthcare company pushing for obviously a corporate solution to the healthcare to our current healthcare crisis, and obviously for big insurance and stuff. So Bernie was making that point, and sure enough, the commercial came up. So I mean, that's not because Bernie Sanders knows what he's talking about. Everybody else is just ignoring it. Oh, who cares? And free market is wonderful. Blah blah blah. Capitalism is awesome, and don't give a shit about how it's screwing over regular people, basically. So. But Bernie Sanders is the only one that talks about those kind of things, and points out the fact that the corporate, the corporatization of our media continues to happen and continues to, screw us over. So let me go on to the next part here. It says, corporate media organizations sponsored by fossil fuel industry ads may gladly provide a platform for guests who insist that our current oligarchic economy is just great, but as studies show, the same outlets often downplay or omit coverage of the climate crisis that those advertisers are helping create. And news outlets owned by Disney and Jeff Bezos may happily tout Disney films and Bezos' plans for space exploration, but we cannot count on them to consistently and aggressively cover workers' fight for better wages at Disney or Bezos' controlled companies. In fact, in one instance, we saw that the Washington Post, which Bezos owns, tried to punish a reporter because he spoke out for better wages at the newspaper. I actually didn't hear about that. That's interesting. There's going to be a link in the article if you guys want to check that out too. It says we need to rebuild and protect a diverse and truly independent press so that real journalists can do the critical jobs that they love and that a functioning democracy requires. When I am president, my administration will put in place policies that will reform the media industry and better protect independent journalism at both the local and national levels. Thank you. That would be a big benefit to somebody like me for sure. Because YouTube and Google and stuff are always, because obviously YouTube and Google like one company essentially? Yeah, aren't they? Yeah, they are. So, I mean, they're, obviously Google is going to promote all the more like corporate channels on YouTube, even the ones that already have TV channels and TV networks where millions or however many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are watching, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. They have their channels on Fox News and they're promoting those channels instead of ours, obviously, because we're saying stuff that they don't want to hear. So moving on here, it says, for example, we will reverse the Trump administration's attempt to make corporate media mergers even more likely in the future. We are not going to rubber stamp proposals like the new plan to merge CBS and Viacom into a $30 billion colossus. I have long opposed media consolidation and was one of only 16 members of the U.S. House to oppose the disastrous 1996 Telecommunications Act, which accelerated consolidation. In my administration, we are going to institute an immediate moratorium on approving mergers of major media corporations until we can better understand the true effect these transactions have on our democracy. And remember, a lot of these big companies, big corporations, big media companies, they hate net neutrality. They can't stand net neutrality. They can't stand the fact that, various websites and stuff, whatever the website is. So, especially news, political type websites, especially ones that have, big opinions that, get into the mainstream. They don't want those to get into the mainstream. They hate those kind of things. So that's why especially the telecommunications companies, the big internet companies, they don't like net neutrality as well, and these companies are against that as well. They don't want any of that stuff to go by because they don't want to give any more of a voice to independent outlets and media like this, and they want to let the corporate, obviously the corporatist and mainstream type voices to get more attention than anybody else, even though they already have tons of attention and they get tons of airtime on whether it's TV, radio, internet too. So yeah, they want to give those people more opportunities than the rest of us who are trying to get our voices out there. Continuing on, it says, in the spirit of existing federal laws, we will start requiring major media corporations to disclose whether or not their corporate transactions and merger proposals will involve significant journalism layoffs. We will also require that that before any future mergers can take place, employees must be given the opportunity to purchase media outlets through employee stock ownership plans, an innovative business model that was first pioneered in the newspaper industry. And we will prevent media-related merger and deregulation decisions at federal agencies that adversely affect people of color and women. As the nonprofit watchdog group Free Press has noted, women and people of color are woefully underrepresented among broadcast license holders. The group points out that this is because when the Federal Communications Commission, which stands for the FCC, has approved mergers, it has failed to consider how such concentration affects ownership opportunities for women and people of color. When our administration appoints new progressive leadership at the FCC, we will reverse the Trump administration's moves, which have gutted long-standing media ownership rules. What Trump has done allows cross-ownership of newspapers and television or radio stations. He has also given the green light to owning multiple stations in the same market. The harm may be great. In theory, says Free Press, these changes would allow a single broadcaster to own both your local newspaper and your top 2 local broadcast stations, plus operate a handful of other stations through sharing agreements, turning your community into a one newsroom town. And by the way, that's something that Rupert Murdoch, who owns News Corp and Fox News, he was known for doing that before he even purchased News Corp. So before he started News Corp, he was the founder, or is the founder. But he owned a bunch of newspapers. This was something that was documented in the documentary movie Outfoxed, which was from 2004, I believe. Yeah, 2004. So it was way back when, and Fox News had started in 1996. But around the 2000-ish, kind of turn of the century, that's when Fox News really got big, especially after 9/11 and kind of pushing a lot of like the right-wing pro George Bush propaganda. So how Outfox was talking, they pointed that out, how Rupert Murdoch was the owner of all these different newspapers and radio stations and TV stations and stuff, and in like a small community, and then he expanded to become News Corp and Fox News and Fox Broadcasting and all that shit. So Rupert Murdoch was basically like the godfather of like corporate owned news media and kind of essentially consolidation, and obviously all these other companies are doing the same exact thing. Continuing on here, it says, in a Bernie Sanders administration, we will do the opposite. We will reinstate and strengthen media ownership rules, and we will limit the number of stations that large broadcasting corporations can own in each market and nationwide. We will also direct federal agencies to study the impact of consolidation in print, television, and digital media to determine whether further antitrust action is necessary. With that part I just read, that is making the big corporate owned publications shaking their boots. That is not something they want. I'm going to get to I'm not going to read the article, but I'm going to point out an article, and I'm going to put it in the description box, where it's an article from Politico, where they're like, the author talks about how all the things that Bernie Sanders wants to do is a terrible idea and it's really, really bad. And he just kind of slaps down all these, things that Bernie's, putting out there, and just kind of just acting as if it's just a terrible idea and it shouldn't happen. But I don't want to give too much away yet. You can check out the article too, and, I'll get to that. Just read the kind of the title and everything for you guys so you get an idea. But and then the last few parts here I want to read. It says, finally, when it comes to Silicon Valley, I will appoint an attorney general as well as Federal Trade Commission officials who more stringently enforce antitrust laws against tech giants like Facebook and Google to prevent them from using their enormous market power to cannibalize, bilk, and defund news organizations. Their monopoly power has particularly harmed small independent news outlets that do not have the corporate infrastructure to fight back. Hello, that's one of them is me. We must also explore new ways to empower media organizations to collectively bargain with these tech monopolies, and we should consider taxing targeted ads and using the revenue to fund nonprofit civic-minded media. That will be part of an overall effort to substantially increase funding for programs that support public media's news gathering operations at the local level, in much the same way many other countries already fund independent public media, so NPR, PBS type networks. Our Constitution's First Amendment explicitly protects the free press because the founders understood how important journalism is to democracy. More than 2 centuries after the Constitution was signed, we cannot sit by and allow corporations, billionaires, and demagogues to destroy the fourth estate, nor can we allow them to replace serious reporting with infotainment and propaganda. So this is a concrete, well laid out, well described, very descriptive and specific explanation for how our corporate media has become a corporate media and only becoming worse and only becoming bigger. And this is something that the corporate media obviously hates, and they don't want to hear any of this shit. They want to avoid this as much as possible because they want to consolidate and combine their their operations with an even bigger corporation or bigger money, so like essentially like a donor, somebody that has a ton of money that can fund their newsroom, and they're not really news, but newsroom, whatever the hell you want to call it, phone newsroom essentially, but to fund them so then they can go out there and push their message. So that brings me to the political article I was talking about. So this political article is titled Bernie's Daft Plan to Save Journalism, and the author Jack Schafer just basically lays out bullet point by bullet point, going over like, oh, well, this is not a good idea and this is not a good idea. This may work, but it's not going to be, it's not going to work ultimately because it doesn't make any sense, blah, 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 blah. He just lays out a bunch of bullshit and a bunch of just ignoring the likelihood that any of these things are actually good ideas. And I mean, it's just typical of what you would expect from a company that is going to bat for big corporations and going to bat for the corporate, the corporate oligarchy that exists in our country, the plutocracy, oligarchy, kleptocracy, whatever you want to call it, the corporate ownership and corporate takeover of this country. They want to keep allowing that to expand. They don't want it to get less, because if they allow it to get less, then they become less influential. And people like myself, like I said, Kyle, Tim Black, Jimmy Dore, all these people that are saying the things that they don't like and the things that they frown upon, those people are going to get bigger. We're going to get bigger. And they can't have that, And, people like us, we have to rely on patrons. We have to rely on our viewers, so you guys, to fund us. We have to rely on you to give us money. And if we don't, have you giving us money, if you don't have you watching us, put aside just the money. It's not always just a money thing. It's the viewers. It's the people so you guys watching us. If you guys didn't have an open mind and weren't so sick of this pathetic media out there that the mainstream media that exists out there, we wouldn't be out here doing what we're doing. Most likely. I mean, then again, who knows? Maybe if we got more fair of a chance, then we would be still doing it anyway. But at least we would be put on the same level. We would be able to exist in the marketplace of ideas and be able to put our ideas out there. And then so somebody like myself or somebody like Kyle or whoever can go out there and put their opinions out there, and it can compete with the likes of, I mean, granted, he probably doesn't claim he has an opinion, but like Wolf Blitzer or whoever, Chris Cuomo, Rachel Maddow, Joy Reid, all those ridiculous, pundits and stuff out there. Our opinions are going to be taken just as seriously as theirs, or not even so much taken as seriously, but put on the same playing field instead of them getting a huge advantage, essentially, because they have a big funding behind them. They have millions and millions of dollars from the corporation that owns their news organization, and they have a head start ahead of the rest of us. I'm just operating from apartment, essentially. And I have a shitty background behind me, and I'm talking into a microphone, which is actually a pretty expensive microphone, to be fair. But aside from that, my camera and my microphone, I mean, I don't have that many advantages. I'm airing my show live on Periscope and Facebook, and and then I post segments on YouTube and Facebook as well. That's all I have, really. I mean, I have very little patrons at the moment, but that's the thing. It's like any kind of small business, right? Now, if I was, I'm a small business, essentially. Obviously, I'm not making that much money like I don't know, I guess most small businesses would. But I am technically considered a small business in regard to the fact that I'm going out there and I'm doing what I'm doing by myself, and then I'm self-funded and self-made and everything. And now, but if I end up going under, so let's say in a couple months I'm not able to do this anymore because I have to, I don't know, go get a job because this isn't paying me enough. Is anybody going to come and help save my ass? Is CNN going to, not that I would want their money, but is it somebody, any fund, not even CNN, I'm saying like a fund or a donor. Is anybody going to come and fund and save my ass? No, because what would happen to CNN or any kind of newspaper publication or whatever, if those outlets end up going under, they're saved right away. Somehow they're replaced or saved, or consolidated with something. Is anybody consolidating me with anything? Is anybody trying to help me keep my job and my small business going? No, because I'm a small business. I'm not a corporation. And that's the same case for any kind of small business out there. Anybody that owns a mom and pop store or something, if they end up going under, the big corporations aren't saving them. I'm sorry, the government isn't saving them. So it's not even so much a funder, like a donor, but it's also the government. So because the government goes and saves the big banks when they go under. So all those, what was it, $700 billion that was given to the Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and all those Chase, JP Morgan Chase, all the different companies that Bank of America and stuff that led to the economic crash, they were saved by the government. So when is the government going to save me if I'm going to go under? If I am forced to go and get a real, not a real job, but to go get a job that pays well, they're just going to be like, all right, you got to go do that. That's what you got to do, because obviously this isn't working, so that's it. Go bust your ass and find, in their opinion, a better job or a better paying job. So they don't give a shit about me. They don't give a shit about, anybody that's, actually putting the hard work into, putting out quality content, because CNN and MSNBC and all these networks are not putting out quality content. They're putting out propaganda, and they pretend to be straight news, and we're giving it to you straight, and we're giving you the facts. They're not giving you the facts. That is the farthest thing from what they're doing. I am the person that is giving you the facts. Now I'm giving you my opinion, but at least I'm giving you an opinion. I'm not going out there and pretending to be straight news. I'm not pretending to be, like the straight shooter, type, whatever, not pundit necessarily, but like a host, like the Cuomo's and Blitzers and stuff. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm giving you my opinion based on how I see it from a progressive leftist point of view. And there is no secret about that. You know that about me. My show is called The Progressive Square, so you know what angle I'm coming from. And those people pretending like they're straight news and continuing to get boosted up by the corporations that own them, let alone being watched by the idiot viewers that watch them, honestly, is just sad. And if people were truly smart enough and weren't such gullible idiots, they wouldn't be watching CNN right now. And that's not me just being bitter. That's just me saying, like, listen, you're not getting quality content or quality information from those outlets. You're getting it more from somebody like myself. And I'm not just saying that because I'm biased and I like myself and I like my own opinion. I'm just telling you because I'm giving you real information. I'm giving you my opinion, but I'm also giving you information and being able to allow you to make a decision based on information that is not coming from a fake straight news opinion. I'm sorry, fake straight news point of view. So I'm not pretending to be straight news. I'm giving you opinion, but at least I'm giving you facts, and I'm not coming from a fake centrist bias either. So, or fake whatever objective bias. I'm objective, but I'm objective from a progressive point of view, and I make sure I don't try and lie to you. Obviously, I'm not making anything up. I take this shit very, very seriously, and the idea of this, going away is not something that I would be happy with. But if anything, it probably motivates me to want to do it more and more so that I can inform you guys as much as I can. And luckily, Bernie Sanders is, he would be helping people like myself, people, all the other independent outlets out there that are getting, siphoned off, put to the side by the big conglomerates and stuff, YouTube, because, just look at the YouTube, demonetization process. That is just fucking over all those people that are, like I said, Kyle, Tim Black, Jimmy Dore. It's demonetization is fucking everybody over that is trying to become and is independent news media. Like, those people are just getting screwed over. I don't know what's going to happen to me when I start trying to make some sort of revenue or profit from YouTube, but I'm probably not going to be making much off of it either. So that's why I have to rely on my patrons. So luckily, Bernie Sanders seems to have a plan to address all these issues, and I trust him to address that very well. And hopefully he obviously becomes president, and we can actually finally have a system of system of media and information flowing through that media without it being influenced by corporate conglomerates and consolidation, consolidation and a takeover by the bigger, kind of not donors, but the bigger kind of owners of those companies, and kind of just taking over everything and then just making it their own, and then just worsening monopolizing the companies and not allowing more information to get out there, and just lessening it to lesser and lesser media companies. And that's what's fucked up our system the worst. It's the lessening of the companies that are able to give us information, and just leaving it to just 6 companies at this point. Who knows if we're leaving it less than that? You never know. So we'll see what happens, but I'm glad Bernie addressed this, and I'm definitely excited to see what he would do if he were to become president.